you have a Bible, we're going to start today in Psalm 51. But we'll start there. We'll move on to some other places. We've been talking about elevating our faith this year, doing things as a church that kind of move the needle, so to speak, or that will get us to take a positive move forward in our faith. And we're calling it Elevate. And this week is certain spiritual practices that we want to engage in as a church this year. Routines or practices are things that we build into our lives, sometimes naturally and sometimes because we're kind of have to or forced to by our life. Some routines or practices are here for a season. So you're training to do the Pacific Coast Trail, or you're training for a triathlon. You adapt certain practices into your life, but they're there for a season in order for you to accomplish that goal of the trail or the triathlon. Some things, routines or practices are forced on us. You may be deployed, and a person might be deployed in Iraq, and so certain things that they have to do when they're there for safety and so forth are things that are outside maybe the norm of what their life is like. Other people have routines forced on them because of health reasons, and maybe their sugar level is high and they have to change diet or if they had exercise. Some we do just kind of the normal way our life goes. I wake up every morning at 20 minutes after 5, and I'm in here at the church about 10 minutes till 6. And I love that next about hour and a half before anybody else gets in the building. Before care starts with the school, teachers arrive. I'm here by myself. I can read my Bible, I can pray, I can write in my journal, I can do anything, and it's quiet, no phones ring. It's just great, and I do that every day. I wake up at 20 after 5, and I'm in here by 10 till 6. And those routines, whether they're forced on us, whether it's kind of natural for me, whether it's because we're in a season of our life, they kind of form the thing that holds things together for us. Well, we're going to challenge ourselves as a church for some spiritual practices in 2018. That's what I will share with you this morning, and there's going to be 4 of them. And the first one is found in is Psalm 51. And so if you've got a Bible, go there. And also if you go on to the next slide. Now here's what the 4 practices are. And after I kind of go over them, I'll come back and we'll look at them in more detail. The first one is the spiritual practice of confession. And that's what we're going to look at in Psalm 51 in a moment. And we're going to do that as a church, or encourage us to do it in March. Then we're going to do the practice of fasting. Although in a moment, when we get to Isaiah 58, you'll see it's a different twist on fasting. And we're going to do that in July. The third one is the spiritual practice of gratitude. Pausing and saying thanks, genuine thanks. And so November being the month of Thanksgiving, we thought that'd be the month for this practice. And what we're going to do with that is we'll create a card with 30 places on it, 30 spaces, and ask our church once a day for the month of November, write down one thing you're thankful for as we go through that month. And at the end of the month, you'll have a record of 30 of them. Then the last one we're calling visitation. We're going to do that in December because that's the time of year, the Christmas season, when loneliness can feel most acute. So that's what we're looking at. So let's go back in detail and see how the Bible challenges us to go in that direction. Psalm 51. This is the first one, and we're calling the spiritual practice of confession. Now, in your Bible, it gives a little introduction to the psalm. Not all psalms do that, maybe a fourth of them. And they give us the history, the setting for why the poet wrote that particular song. And this one, it says at the beginning, for the director of music, a psalm of David, when the prophet Nathan came to him after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba. Then we're told that it's written by David. So this poem, this psalm, David writes after he's confronted with, after he's forced to look at his adultery in light of other people know about it. Psalm 51, verse 1. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love, according to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash away all my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you and you only have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight. So you are right in your verdict, and justified when you judge. As David allows us to watch him, look at him, hear him, as he's confessing this to the Lord, he's doing three things here at the beginning of his confession. The first one, in verses 1 and 2, is he describes what he's done with three different words. And the words he uses are transgressions, iniquity, and sin. All have a different nuance to them. In the Old Testament, the word transgressions is something that you identify as a rebellion, a defiance, of a shaking your fist and saying, no, I'm going to do this instead. It's you tell your child to do A, your child does B. And look at you while they're doing it. It's that rebellion. That's what that word has behind it. Then he calls it iniquity. The nuance of calling something evil or wicked. And then the third one, he calls it sin. That word's used in the Old Testament for missing the mark of something. It's used of men who could pull a bow and fire an arrow at a hare and not miss the hare. It means you have a target and you're missing the target. So in his confession, David is being blatantly honest with himself about what he had done. He's saying, God, what I did to you is defiance. It was evil. And was clearly not doing what you wanted me to do. It missed the mark. So when we do our confession as a church leading toward communion in March, we want us to have a moment where we are blatantly honest about ourselves, about our motives, our intents, things we do, and then we're able to call them what David called his. Rebellion, defiance, evil, missing the mark. His confession here, this blatant confession, had that as its feature to begin with. Second feature of it, verse 3, he says, I know my transgressions and my sin is ever before me. In other words, he says, I look around in my life and I can see that this is there. It's part of who I am. It's like my shadow. I can't get away from it. And David, I think, here is seeing his affair with Bathsheba as much more than one evening. David, I think, here realizes that in his whole life, and nothing that we have written in the Bible shows us that he had a healthy relationship with a female. He had children by, I think, 6 or 7 women. And none of those do we see him having a normal, healthy, give and take relationship with a woman. None. And in the one marriage he had with Michal, who was the daughter of Saul, it's clear that once he married her, he abandoned her. And eventually went off with someone else and only wanted her back when it suited his political reasons. And he needed her to kind of pull together his base when he became king. But it's more than that. It's David seeing not only did he sin against God, but he sinned against Bathsheba. He sinned against her husband when he orchestrated her murder. He sinned against their little boy who died as a result of it. He sinned against the people in the palace who he intended that they would keep his secret. He sinned against the people at battle when they pulled away from Uriah, Bathsheba's husband, allowing him to die, that they had to bear some responsibility for that. That he saw his sin as moving out into his life in every direction. Which is why he says, I know my transgressions and my sin is always before me. The third part of his confession then, he says in verse 4, against you and you only have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight. Doesn't mean he was minimizing what he did to Bathsheba or to her husband or the people around him, but he saw at his root, David had sinned against God, and he was saying by his actions, God, you've blessed me in my life. You protected me when I went against Goliath. You watched over me when Saul wanted to kill me. You were with me when I was a wanderer and had no place to lay my head. At every step in my life, God, you were there providing for me. And I want you to know, Lord, that's not enough. I need that woman. And so he realizes, despite how his sin was played out in other people's lives, the person his sin was directed against was God himself. Now, that type of confession is what we want to do as a church as we're heading toward communion in March, right before Easter, is where we come before God and we realize, Lord, I don't want to simply confess this one act, but I want to see what's behind it. What's the root of it? What is in my heart over this? But we're not doing it just to confess for confession's sake. It's for what David found. Look on in Psalm 51 and verse 5. He says, surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. You desired faithfulness even in the womb. You taught me wisdom in that secret place. Verse 7, cleanse me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Wash me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. Blot out all my iniquity. The confession in his heart drove him to God's mercy and God's grace. That's the point of doing it. So when we do it as a church, it's not just so we can have a moment where we just kind of vomit out everything, but rather it's in the confession that it drives us to the cross, to Jesus, where we realize his mercy is overflowing and I'm made clean, which is what communion is about. When we get together for communion in March, it's to sit down and realize I'm cleansed from everything by God's mercy and grace. So that's our first practice. We're going to do it in March. It's called confession. All right, go over a few pages from Psalm 51 to Isaiah chapter 58. And a different look at fasting. We're choosing July for this practice because we tend to turn our attention in July toward America and freedom and what freedom is like. And that's what's going on here in Isaiah 58. Let's start reading in verse 3. God's quoting the people. Why have we fasted, they say, and you, Lord, haven't seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves, and you've not noticed? So the people are wondering. We've been sincere and devout. We've even fasted. And God's not paying attention. And they want to know why. And God says, yet on the days of your fasting, you do what you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is that the kind of fast I've chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves? Is it only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying in sackcloth and ashes? Is that what you call a fast? A day acceptable to the Lord? And he's saying to the people, do you think just because you deny yourself eating for a day or 2 days or 3 days or however long, do you think that by doing that, somehow that's acceptable to me when your heart is not in it? He said, I don't care about that. He said, I don't care what's on your menu. I'm looking for a different kind of fast. Verse 6. Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and provide the poor wanderer with shelter? Or when you see the naked, to clothe them and not turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. He's saying the kind of fasting I want is not whether you eat or not on a particular day or two. the kind of fasting I want is when you deny yourself not food, but deny yourself to help someone in need. That you look out for the person who doesn't have freedom in their life, the person who's living in oppression, the person who's suffering, the person who doesn't have food for themselves. Deny yourself in that way to help relieve the struggle that someone else has. That's the kind of fasting he's looking for. So in July, we will challenge ourselves as a church. Who around us is someone that we can say, I want to help them with the burden that they've got in their life? Whatever it might be, whatever it looks like, I'm going to deny myself so I can help that person's life be a little bit better. God says, that's the kind of fasting I want, is when you help the oppressed or help the naked, help the people who are hungry. So we'll do that in July. Let's look at Psalm 100 and what we want to do in November. Psalm 100. Verse 1. And if we notice, there's an introductory note to this psalm. It says at the beginning, a psalm for giving grateful praise. So this little psalm was written about being thankful. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It's he who's made us. We are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name, for the Lord is good and his love endures forever. One of the easiest things in the world to do is complain. Oh, we're all good at it. Just put us in the wrong situation at the wrong moment, and we become an expert complainer. Especially in the time in which we live, it's so toxic. I mean, you turn on the television, and you're just faced with it on any news station. And when we complain, kind of we're lying behind it in our heart is that we are judge and jury over another person's actions. And that we have the right to evaluate and judge them according to their actions. And when we complain, we don't consider this truth, this fact, that even as we complain about what others have done or are doing, or someone has done something, some action, or we don't realize that we are the cause of someone else's complaints. You see? Where was I the other day? I think it was going on a hospital visit. I think that's what it was. And you're driving around to find a place to park. And this extend cab truck was there. I think it was out maybe at Lowe's. It was outside, and the weather was bad. And there was a parking space near the building where I was going to go. And I spot it, another aisle over, come over. And the extend cab truck, and I got no problem with extend cab trucks. So if you have one, that was in the space on the front, but the back of the cab went over the line for the space behind it, which was the open space I was looking for when I drove up to it and realized I couldn't get into space. Well, as I drive by, I'm thinking all kinds of things about the guy that drove that truck. And they came rapid fire. I didn't have to think about it. They just came. And what we're going to do in November then, this spiritual practice, because it's the month of thanks for us, is to pause every day and write something down for which we're genuinely thankful. It doesn't mean a big thing, rather just something you're genuinely thankful for. Because he tells us in Psalm 100, it's not a suggestion, it's a command. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him. Those are commands. We're told to give, be thankful. And so that spiritual practice will be in November, the practice of thanks. So lastly, go to the end of your Bibles to the book of James in chapter 1. We're calling this the spiritual practice of visitation. James chapter 1, starting in verse 26. Those who consider themselves religious, okay, let's pause there. I would say that everybody sitting here qualifies for that. I mean, if you consider yourself religious, you're probably going to be in a building like this on today. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't people out there who consider themselves religious who aren't here. They may too. I'm just saying by being here, in some way you consider religion or whatever to be some part of who you are. Okay? So he's talking to all of us. Those who consider themselves religious, and do not keep a tight rein on their tongues, deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Man, that's pretty powerful. Your religion is worthless. You think of things that are worthless. You walk along and there's some litter in the street and you see a crushed Coke can, you see a McDonald's bag that's been wrinkled up and thrown away. Those are things we say are worthless. Your religion is worthless. Verse 27, religion that God our Father accepts. So that's something that's pretty important to want to know what follows. What's the kind of religion, what's the kind of spirituality that God accepts, that God says, I like that? The kind that the Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. The phrase to look after means to look after someone graciously, with attention. It's used in the Old Testament in 1 Samuel chapter 2, when Hannah, that wonderful woman that we read about there, had been without children for so long, and she had to live with her husband's other wife who had children, and she was constantly reminding Hannah that she wasn't able to have children. Finally, Hannah has a child. His name's Samuel. And because she had made a commitment to the Lord, she gave Samuel over to the religious leaders, the tabernacle people in Israel, so that he could be trained as a prophet. And it says after that, it says God took notice of Hannah and gave her many children, sons and daughters. That word that's used there means God looked after Hannah, that he was graciously focused on her, that he was responding to her, is what is the word here, where he says to look after widows and orphans, to take gracious notice of someone, to see someone with compassion. That's the kind of religious activity God finds pure and faultless. So we're going to make that our spiritual practice in December. That during the Christmas season, we would identify someone who we think might have a difficult time during the holiday, for whatever reason. A time it might be lonely. It might be that they're thinking, gosh, I just want to get through Christmas as quickly as possible and move on. That we would show the kind of attention to them that he's calling for here, that gracious attention. And that's what we're going to do in December. So those are the spiritual practices that we're going to challenge ourselves to do in 2018. One in March, one in July, one in November, one in December. Confession, different kind of fasting, thankfulness or gratitude, and visiting those who may be lonely. So let's go on to the next slide. So are you in with that? Well, we'll know in about 6 or 7 weeks, because we'll have Easter's early this year, and we'll have Maundy Thursday Communion the last Thursday of March, which isn't very far. And are you in? Are you willing to say, yeah, to elevate my faith this year, those are 4 things I'm going to grab onto. I'm going to make those part of my life in 2018. Confession, a different kind of fasting, gratitude, and visitation of the lonely. Taking note of the lonely in 2018. Well, we're going to close now instead of closing with a song, because I'm running out of time. So what I want you to do right now is you think of those 4 things. Confession, a different kind of honesty, gratitude, visiting the lonely, being attentive to them. Which one now, as you ponder it, you find yourself resonating with it right now? And take a moment and pray and say, God, why is that sticking out for me right now? Why is that resonating with me now? Okay, so let's do that for a moment. Our Father in heaven, each of those 4 practices we see in your word as things that can make a difference in our spiritual walk. It's interesting, Lord. It's a mystery now, standing at the front end of it, how you could use those in each of our lives, what they'll mean to us. And I'm sure there'll be 1 or 2 that maybe have a greater impact on us than maybe 1 or 2 of the others. And yet, by doing them, we want to elevate our faith. We want to say, I want to be more like Jesus in 2018. And these things can help that. As we start this year, Lord, the beginning step is to say, do I know Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior? And I pray, Lord, that you would, through your Spirit, make us aware if there's someone here and they've never taken that step, that they would say, the first thing I got to do is make Jesus Christ my Lord and Savior. We pray, Lord, as we're wrapping up now, for especially those in our church family and others who have a hard time getting around when the weather's cold and there's a lot of snow and there's ice, that they'd be taken care of. No one would have a fall or be injured because of the weather. And Lord, we pray for those people over in Hawaii that had that awful half an hour yesterday where they thought it was going to be bad. We pray for those people, Lord, and for us, that moment would make us realize, what if that happened? Have I made things right through my Creator and Jesus Christ on the cross? Thank you, Lord, for this day, and we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.